Hey everyone, welcome back to the See-Through Podcast, a podcast that creates transparency on disabilities and the champions with them. I'm the host, Lance Johnson, and I live, create, and podcast in Brooklyn, New York with a vision impairment called retinitis pigmentosa. And while my podcast covers the entire disability community, lately I've been on a roll with featuring guests who also are in the visually impaired community. And that trend continues today. My guest today is Becky Andrews, and she herself has retinitis pigmentosa, or RP for short. And let me tell you, this episode is stacked with information because Becky is a very accomplished woman who is still kicking ass today. Becky is a licensed clinical mental health counselor, entrepreneur, as she is the business leader of two businesses, Resilient Solutions, and her nonprofit Oasis Center for Hope. Becky has run 9 marathons and cycles all over the country on a tandem bike with her husband. She is an author of the book titled Look Up, Move Forward, which she calls part memoir and part resilience manifesto, as it covers how she adopted a proactive approach to creating a life of purpose and joy while adapting to blindness. Becky is what I call an RP veteran. And as a rookie myself, I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with her, and I can't wait to share it with everyone. And since Becky is a licensed therapist, I kind of feel like I got a free therapy session during our talk. So, score me. But before you hear the conversation, make sure you follow or subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform you listen on. Also, make sure to follow the podcast on social media. The handle is @SeeThroughPod. And if you need a convenient place to find everything related to this podcast, just visit seethroughpod.com. And with that said, here's my conversation with Becky Andrews. Yeah, I'm super excited to talk. We have a lot to cover because you have covered a lot in your life. You're a very well-rounded individual, and you're what I would call one of the RP veterans. You've been doing this for years, and I'm coming to you as a rookie, for some advice, some input.
I like that term. It's been, almost 38 years since I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa.
Almost 30 years?
38 years.
38 years. So yeah, you've probably thought of everything when it comes to RP and have experienced everything. And the fact that you're a mental health counselor probably allows you to go real deep into the psychology of having, visual impairment.
I feel like that's helped. That whole growth mindset of I know I still have a lot to learn. Each day is a new learning experience.
Yeah, and that's what this podcast is about. The tagline for it is a podcast that creates transparency on disabilities and the champions with them. And, the whole goal of my podcast is just have real conversations with people in the disability community and just have raw conversations that real stuff is said and insightful stuff is said, sometimes funny stuff, sometimes sad, emotional things. We cover all of it, and we'll just see where this conversation goes.
Sounds great.
Yeah, but I think a safe way to open this podcast is a simple intro to yourself. Can you tell everyone who you are and where you live and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Becky Andrews. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor at Resilient Solutions. I'm sure we'll get to talk more about that. I love where we live. Lots of fun things to do. We love to tandem bike, run, hike, get out in the mountains.
And you're in Utah, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just north of Salt Lake City.
Awesome. Very pretty.
It is nice.
How's the weather right now?
I think it's in the 50s. Went for a run this morning and that's how I love to start my day, is pulling out the tether. I've got a couple really good friends that run with me. We use a tether. So they're my guides. And it was a beautiful kind of crisp morning, had a jacket on. Sometimes the other day they were describing that there were a few deer on the side of the road that were waiting for a good chance to cross the street. So it's spring's coming here.
You threw out a few things there that I want to dive into, I think. So the first one being, we said earlier you have retinitis pigmentosa. So you're considered legally blind. How much vision do you have left in your field of vision?
Right. So I have about 3 degrees, a little peephole in both eyes. It kind of fluctuates on the acuity in there. So, it's just and over the years, it's just continued to narrow down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I describe it, kind of like the size of a dime or a quarter.
Okay.
It changes. Some days are a little bit better than others as far as that goes, but.
Yeah, that's good to know. And I'm only asking because I think it helps, paint a picture for the listeners to kind of know your perspective and kind of how you've had to adapt and what you've had to adapt to.
Right. Yeah.
Like, for example, you mentioned you went for a run this morning and you said you have some friends and a tether. Can you kind of explain your running process?
Right. Yeah. I remember running, way back with my dad when he would kind of, we'd run around the track just as I was newly diagnosed, and kind of made sure I had a clear pathway. And then some years went by and I really wanted to get back into running. And so originally my husband set up a tether. He got like a bungee cord and we ran together and just realized that I loved it and realized that I could do that with a tether as a guide. And when you think of a tether, like I'm holding on to one side and then my guide is holding, has it wrapped around their arms, the other side. So it's about 18 inches long. And
okay.
And it's kind of like sighted guide, you're following the movement, picking up on, if you need to slow down or if there's a dip in the road. And, so with some verbal commands, or verbal guidance, not commands, but we can run. We've run 9 marathons, and I have these incredible. I've run most consistently. I've run with either my husband or 2 really close friends that live close enough that we can meet at my house and run. I've also met somebody the day of a run and handed them the tether and been able to do it. So kind of as I've done it more, I think my confidence has built.
Yeah.
In able to do that.
So the tether, you said your husband originally made it from like a bungee cord. Yeah. Has that evolved? What does that involve now?
It's definitely involved. In fact, my friend that has a business now called At My Guideline, and she sells these tethers. And so now I have, it's a elastic band on one side that hooks onto my guide's arm, and then I hang on to the other loop. So yeah, it's evolved, but I think that example with my husband getting that has helped me. Like we've been traveling. One time we were in Israel and I said, I'd love to go for a run. And we were trying to find something that was about the right length to use. We finally, we were with a tour group and we had, our name tags with the lanyards. And so we pulled off one of those and used that as a tether. So, I've been creative over the years on what that needs to be, but I say have tether, we'll run.
It's like the classic phrase, where there's a will, there's a way.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And not everything has to be fancy.
Yeah. True.
I think the key is creativity and just kind of the drive to adapt.
Yeah. I love the phrase, like find a way.
Yeah.
I think when we have that mindset, okay, I got to get creative. There's a way to do this.
Another thought that popped into my head is your friends. Let's say they have a faster pace than you. Do they match your pace, or have you had to kind of adapt to keep up with them?
Ideally, I guess, we have a pretty similar pace, or maybe they're faster, but they slow down for me, but we run at a pretty comfortable, consistent pace. But I think, okay. It would be hard, and that's certainly not my case. But if I was faster, your guides need to be able to run at your pace to make that work. And there's a lot of neat organizations, the Achilles Club, United in Stride, there's some neat groups if anybody wants to get involved in running.
Yeah, that's great to know. I didn't know there were specific groups or organizations for running.
Yeah.
So being active sounds like something that you're an advocate for, as someone who's visually impaired.
I think, and I think I've probably, always had a level of activity, but I feel like when I was starting to lose my eyesight, I started to lose that activity. My vision closed in, and before I was trained with a cane, and before I started, working with guide dogs, I was slowing down. I was being careful. I was, needing to calculate my steps. So those opportunities of, getting on that tandem bike for the first time and getting back into running and hiking, I feel like I kind of have this added appreciation for that, because I did go through a time where I didn't know if I'd be able to do that. I didn't have a lot of friends at that point that, were blind or experiencing vision loss. So I didn't have a lot of a reference point of, okay, this is how you do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so whenever you were first diagnosed, it sounds like there was kind of this period of probably confusion, a little bit, maybe you probably felt bad for yourself, felt down. And then it sounds like being active kind of got your spirits up and kind of made you realize, or potentially realize, like, hey, you can still do things, and still have that sense of accomplishment from running and things like that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for me, I know we're all different, but for me, I think there was a real grieving process, as you lose a little bit more vision, then there was new adjustments, there was new changes. It felt like there was things that I couldn't do. And so, it took some time to kind of process those feelings and that loss, and then be able to say, okay, what's another way to do this? And that has really, really helped me over the years is to first of all, I think allow that grieving process that I certainly have experienced, like, boy, giving up driving, that's hard. And, years later, it's not on my radar. I'm used to these other options, but there's still those times where you're like, I wish I could just hop in the car, and I think that those things are like, it's a journey of, discovering who you are and, maybe shifting dreams a bit. And, so I think being active and having those doors open up certainly, been a part of that.
I agree. Everyone experiences it differently, and it's kind of, everyone's symptoms of RP and and visual impairment are different. So it's kind of hard to like have like a one size fits all solution. But I always like to ask my guests about things like that, because what I find myself most interested in is like how people adapt to things. And because what I've noticed is there is this trend of kind of, especially with RP community, like denial of having it, and then kind of this like path to acceptance.
Right.
And some people are quick to find that acceptance, and some people are slow to find that acceptance. And I'm 30 years old, and I was diagnosed when I was 12 because my mom has RP. So at my eye doctor was kind of keeping an eagle eye on me, because it's a dominant trait in terms of my specific strain of RP. But, I was diagnosed with 12, and when I'm 12, it's not going to sink in. It's not going to register really. But, as I got older and I actually started noticing changes, it's kind of slowly, you're like, all right, here it goes. Here it comes, Yeah. And it's just kind of this thing that can wear on your mind if you let it. It can be like a weight on your back, because, for example, I'm a video editor. So, and I went to film school, and I've been making movies since I was in high school, and it's just like a fun hobby of mine, and it has somewhat turned into a career, that's how I pay my bills, is through video editing. So it's like, it's kind of hard if you really want to look down the road, you're like, eventually I'm not going to be able to edit. So sometimes I'll be having just a normal day at my computer working, and then that thought will just kind of pop in, like you can't do this forever, kind of a whisper into my ear, and it can kind of bum me out. So that's partially why I started this podcast, because I want to have the conversations with people like you, and I want to start opening my mind to a wider potential and possibilities for things that I could kind of get into, and maybe it's not the end of the world. There's new things to try, new things to do. There's ways to adapt. And it's kind of like I'm trying to make messages to like my younger self, that could potentially, if someone else is in my shoes that I was in 10 years ago, honestly, even 5 years ago, could potentially hear these conversations and say, okay, that's a good way to think about it. I haven't thought about it that way. It's just, it doesn't have to be all just gloom and doom, and I think people like you are like a really good example of that.
Right. What an empowering thing you're doing. And you're right. It's like, it's this ambiguity thing that we navigate, like that uncertainty. When is this going to change? How prepare, like what preparation should I do now for the future? I think there's a lot of ambiguity that I feel like has also helped me in other areas of life. You think carrying RP and all that you have to deal with, I think really gives us tools for other aspects in life too.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to ask you, because earlier you brought up grief, you had this grieving stage, and I know you're a mental health counselor, and I know part of that involves grief counseling. Is that something that came into your life post your diagnosis, or was this something you were always into, like in terms of mental health counseling, or did RP and kind of your experience there kind of spark that?
I think RP definitely helped spark it. My bachelor's, my bachelor's is in business, and I finished, and I had I had 2 little kids, was fairly new in the RP process, and just really not sure what I was going to do with that degree in business. And about that time, I started doing some volunteer work and getting involved with some of the, organizations, and recognized that was really more the area that I was passionate about. I personally I really appreciate that my parents, after my diagnosis, they found a therapist that had RP for me to go visit.
Oh, wow.
And it was really meaningful. I look back and I was still kind of in the denial phase, with the whole process, but it really was helpful to just meet with her. And, I think in the back of my mind, what stayed too was, okay, she's got a profession she loves. She's got a family. She can't drive. She's getting to work, kind of all these little messages that I needed to see in action, I experienced through her. And I felt like kind of when I was exploring, that made a difference too. It's like, maybe I can be helpful to someone else in their process.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that was what a coincidence that you could have a counselor with RP,
Yeah.
Because it's a rare disease.
Right.
So
yeah, I credit like my parents, they searched her out. We flew to California.
Yeah.
So that, this was pre-telehealth and all those things that we could do now, to have that visit. And it was really meaningful and took me into that field, I think. So I got to spend some time at the Moran Eye Center in the patient support program. And it was actually there that someone from a grief center came over and started talking about their program and kind of discussed how, losing your eyesight can be a grieving process. Mm-hmm. And so I did some work, I was really in a place of wanting to expand. So I did some work with a lot of different agencies with a lot of different types of grief, but that's always been a part of my profession and specialties is, helping people, holding space for people that are going through grief, whether it's, the loss of a loved one, a trauma, an ambiguous loss, disability, whatever that might be.
Yeah, and grief is such a mystery, and at least to me it is, because have experienced different kinds of grief, like personally with my vision, that kind of gray cloud I described earlier about maybe the thought of I can't do what I love to do forever.
Yeah.
And giving up driving and just kind of having to function differently than I planned to, or how society kind of envisions me to be, and kind of trying to rewrite how my brain's wired in terms of what to expect in myself, and
almost like rewrite your story in a way.
Yeah, because like there, for example, and I for some reason this always pops up into my mind is the whole not driving thing. It's bigger than just me just wanting to drive somewhere to do things that I want to do. It's like, I just got married last year.
Wow.
Thank you. And it's kind of like, I don't know what it is, but the fact that I can't like drive my wife, if like say we go on a vacation and I can't like get a rental car and drive around, it's kind of all up to her. It kind of makes me feel less than, like I'm not, the typical like masculine viewpoint of I have to provide for my wife. How can I provide for her if I can't drive? Another example of that is, protecting you have to protect your wife. If you can't see good, you're probably not going to be that good at protecting in like a physical altercation type of thing. And and I know that's like a hypothetical scenario, and I'm definitely not starting fights or anything like that. But that's just an idea that pops into my mind, and you kind of have to learn to let go of kind of these baked in perspectives that you kind of absorb through pop culture on TV and maybe outdated viewpoints on things. But at the same time, that stuff, I just find it's just baked into my brain, and sometimes it's hard to let those things go. So I'm still figuring that out. Who knows when I'll figure that out, if I ever will. But
when you think, I think those, like, so well said, those things come up at different times, right? Like, I wish I could hop in the car and get my mom back to where she needs to be. Like, there's those times where you're going, okay, this feels like the way I want to be able to help or be in this relationship, and creating those different ways of being. Because I'm thinking, gosh, I'm like, there's so many ways that you are showing up for your wife and being there, and all that. But yet you also have to honor those parts that you go, God, I would like to be the one renting the car and getting in that seat, and I think that's such a important part of the journey, is allowing yourself to feel and go through that process. It helps us get to the other side, or just to, like, gosh, this moment is hard for me, and
those moments will just pop up too.
Right.
Moments, some of them you haven't even thought of yet, and then something will happen, and you're like, oh, okay, that's another one.
It can just wash over you, or like a wave of the ocean or something. At unexpected times where you're like, this moment is hard, and
and it can be hard for people around you too, because they can't see what you see, and it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to describe, like, it's an invisible disability for me. I still have central vision enough to where, I don't drive anymore, but I can get around. I live in New York City, and I'm still able to get around, take the subway, and I don't use a white cane. I just move slow sometimes if there's like larger crowds, and I have to take my time, but I just bought my first cane. I ordered it the other day. I'm going to try to start getting some O&M training.
Oh, nice.
Just to kind of set myself up for success. And, I'll be honest, I've talked about this on past episodes, but I just find myself every now and then thinking, like, what would be helpful if I had some sort of tool to help me navigate if it's like nighttime or this new environment, or indoor kind of setup. So I'm like, all right, it's time. And I've had some embarrassing moments, like
at first I found it helpful to have one that was just folded up, so that at different times, I could pull it out, or that it became part of me. And because I think that is like a process, right? Like, I remember going through the O&M training and just loving, like, wow, this is really helpful. And then it was like I went back to my own neighborhood. It was like, oh, somebody might see me. It was like this. And that seems so silly in a way, but I think it was, it's just this process. And so I remember I met back with the O&M instructor, and we had a heart to heart, and she was great. I said, I'm having a hard time using this cane at times. It just, it feels hard. And she went through and, is it helpful? Yes, it's very helpful. Is your family supportive? Yeah, my husband was very supportive and happy that I was using that tool. And then she said, well, I think you just need to be who you are. And it was just kind of this simple statement, but it was really freeing to be like, I know that others might not understand. I think RP is it's an interesting eye condition, sometimes it can be confusing. It, like you say, it can be invisible to others. And it felt like her comments kind of just gave me permission to pull it out and use it on a more regular basis and go, this is pretty helpful. And it kind of was like, this feels like I can breathe. I'm not going to bang into somebody and, go through that whole process of trying to apologize, trying to explain, just it was out there. But I think it is such a process of, I look back and really credit it to giving me that sense of, being who I am and not kind of letting go of some of that, what does somebody think, or that comparison, or those different things. I still pull out my cane and think, thank you for the lessons you taught me, and also remembering what a journey it is.
It's definitely a journey, and what I kind of have learned from talking to people in the RP community is that there seems to be, maybe I want to know if you agree with this, but it seems like step one is to quit driving, and that's like the biggest first kind of hit of realization into that your independence is kind of going to change. And then the second big step is the cane, because the cane is you're self-identifying, you're kind of outing yourself as someone who's visually impaired to everyone else, because I it seems like most people, including myself, try their absolute best to hide that they have a visual impairment.
Yeah. And I think that's like the natural progression. And I think for a lot of people, it is a relief too, when you pull out that cane and go, okay, I don't have to hide this anymore or feel that pressure of it. I just get to be who I am.
Yeah. And I look forward to that.
Yeah.
But I know it's going to be challenging, and I know I'm going to have to fight with my internal dialogue on what are people thinking. And, some people in my neighborhood might say like, hey, I see that guy walking and he didn't have a cane last week, is he, but it doesn't matter because you're not even close to those people, and as long as you have the support of the people around you, and if you're kind of comfortable in your own skin and kind of, then you should be happy and be thankful that you have the opportunity to kind of use the cane and get around,
And sometimes, I think that is a helpful space to be in. It can be an opportunity to educate too, when you feel like, you think sometimes you're in a hurry, you don't have the space to, educate on RP, but sometimes it's really helpful. I have a pair of goggles. I don't know if you've seen those before, but they're simulated goggles, and someone else can put those on, and it really gives them a sense of, this is what, okay, I get it now, and there's different, acuity that you can order for the simulated, or different degrees. We've had a pair, and then as my vision has declined, my husband's kind of matched them up more to what I can see. So I can share those with someone, and they can understand, okay. And it's become a really helpful education tool, for my family, for friends, speaking at an event, then you can share that, and then invite them to, do a task or something. And it helps them understand, okay, I can see that maybe you can still see a little bit in that peephole, but I get now while navigating around, a cane or a guide dog is so helpful.
Yeah. And I guess, I'll have to look into those goggles, because education is a thing people underestimate and under value, I think, in terms of, because I think the reality is most people just haven't been around visually impaired people?
Yeah, I recognized, when I was diagnosed, I thought back and I thought, I could think of a couple people that I had met that were blind or low vision. I didn't know anybody with RP. So it was this, new learning. First of all, just connecting with other people and understanding the condition myself before I could, educate to others.
Yeah, and I kind of had an advantage that of seeing my mom, because I know some people, they don't have that, and they just notice visual changes, and then they go to an eye doctor, and then they're diagnosed, and it's usually at like an older age. And then that kind of is like hits you like a ton of bricks, I'm assuming. But since I think my advantage, but at the same time it's has its disadvantages. I was diagnosed young. I was able to see firsthand through my mom kind of what to expect, and I was able to slowly process it versus just be told one day. And I think that's been helpful for me in terms of easing into it. So I can't really give that perspective, in terms of someone out there listening who maybe was just diagnosed or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I do want to give the perspective of kind of like what we're talking about, that just be yourself and be open and learn to adapt. And it is a process, and it will take time. And there's no time, there's no deadline. There's no deadline to have it all figured out and to be completely mobile on a cane. Just do it at your own pace.
Right. Yeah. I found that really helpful. And so I feel like I'm learning and growing.
Yeah, it's a never ending thing. You never just wake up one morning and you're like, oh, I learned everything. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a gift. If I were to think of different gifts from RP, I think that mindset that RP helped me develop that mindset. Because I feel like it's a lot easier to navigate RP if you have that mindset. And so suddenly then you find you're using that mindset in other parts of your life that can be really helpful too.
Yeah, I think it is helpful. I think kind of the mindset of adaptability and to take things as they come to you, I think is universal.
Yeah, yeah.
Another thing too is, since RP is degenerative and kind of your vision changes over time, you have friends from high school and that you're still friends with, and when you were hanging out with them years ago, you had, it wasn't really affecting you as much, and now your vision's different. It's kind of hard to explain it, and I think those goggles might help that if I can ever get a pair of those. And
yeah, I'd be happy to share the link with you too. I think of, because
share that with me.
They've been really helpful to me, just to share, when someone wants to understand, to put those on and go, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just, I just find myself and it just comes with the territory, I guess, that I'm the sole educator of the visually impaired community to my friends and family, I'm the source of all knowledge, so I did a podcast interview with my friend Cardin Wyckoff, who she also has a podcast called Freewheeling with Cardin. It's a really great podcast, but what I talked to her about was that I recommend if you know someone with a disability or visual impairment, don't just rely on that person to explain everything to you. Kind of take it into your own hands and maybe do a little bit of research yourself.
Right.
Because it's a dense subject that sometimes, if you just rely on your friend or loved one to explain their situation to you, you're not going to get the whole picture. And I think some research yourself can go a long way. And that's kind of the idea behind, there's a lot of activism right now in terms of, having more people represented in pop culture on like TV and things like that, just to kind of plant those seeds of different lifestyles and ways of living.
Right.
But yeah, I guess that was my only point, was just, if you're listening and you want to know more about something your friend's going through, just do your own research.
Doesn't that mean so much? Because I think, like you said, it can feel like a lot to manage if you feel, I got to be the sole educator, and it means a lot when a friend or family member comes to you and says, hey, I've been reading up on this. Can you tell me a little bit about what your eye condition is, or help me understand? Yeah. Or I've read this book. And, I think that means so much.
It does. It does mean a lot. And it helps you kind of feel like, at the very least, it just lets you know that your friend knows you have something going on. So if you hang out with them or talk to them or catch up with them, they know to factor that in. Like if I meet up with an old friend, and they're like, hey, let's go for a night run, I won't have to say, actually, I can't go for a night run. I can't really, you see what I'm saying? Like there's certain activities that your friends could learn to.
Yeah. You think I love the term access intimacy, and you think it's kind of when it just flows, when someone just kind of they just flow. It's that friend that might say, I recognize that you don't drive. Hey, do you want to ride to that conference? Or someone said, your friend says, hey, are you interested in going for a run? I know that, nights are difficult. I have this tether. Do you want to try it? Kind of that.
Yeah.
It's just part of the conversation. It just flows. Or you're in a dark lit movie and someone says, hey, do you want to grab my elbow to walk through? It's kind of just like that natural, it's an awareness of it, but it's not like overboard. Just kind of.
Exactly. Because we don't want to be treated like a baby or anything like that,
Right. Yeah. Because we give in ways and we receive in ways. We need, they're like, it can still be balanced. It might just be in a different way. So I appreciate that term. I think I can recognize when that happens in my life with people, when you go, it just flows. They just, I was at a conference, signing in, and one of my colleagues she grabs the pen, how you have to sign in on a line, and that can be challenging to find your name and everything. And she just kind of naturally, holds the pen to where I need to sign. I grab the pen and sign in, and it just, it just kind of flows. She knows that that's something that is going to be challenging for me. And so just, that whole process of that understanding, and I think it's neat when it happens, when it just kind of flows.
Yeah, I agree. And I've never heard that term, and you called it access intimacy.
Uh-huh.
Nice. I like that. I wrote it down, so I'm gonna remember that one. But yeah, I think let's move on to a new topic. We were talking about the cane earlier, but I don't think we should leave out the fact that you have a guide dog, and I haven't had a guest on my podcast yet who has had a guide dog.
Oh.
So I think I would love to hear that perspective and kind of how that is helpful, and what's the difference between a guide dog and a cane. And
certainly, yes. So I had started to use it. I had been using my cane for a few years, had a pretty significant commute, took the bus, and downtown needed to navigate a few streets and then take another bus up to my office. And, a cane was working, but I was really intrigued with a guide dog. I'd had some friends that had a guide dog, and just really at that point I had 2 kids that were in elementary school, so at active ages. And so that was 23 years ago. I gotta do my math, but I think so. When I thought I want to try this. I want to see what it's like. I knew very little about the process other than I wanted to just walk with ease, even more. So when you think about it, a cane identifies the objects. You cross paths with it, and it taps you into an object so that you have that awareness. And a guide dog navigates you around that object.
Okay.
So, they're both super helpful. There's times where you're like, I want to orient myself to this whole area. I want to use my cane so I'm familiar with the area. But then there's also the times where you're like, I just want to get where I need to go. And it's okay to have, so a guide dog is going to weave you around people, where a cane might, you might tap into the person and go, oh, okay, there's a person got to weave around, where a guide dog is going to weave you around. I mean, they're going to do similar things, stop at a guide dog will stop at any elevation that's different. So at a curb, at stairs, at the end of the street, so navigate around things. They know left, right. They start learning routes, which is really fun. You can start adding the words that you teach them, find the stairs, find the elevator, find the door, so it just starts flowing. So I've had 3 guide dogs now. My first guide, Pantera, worked for 9 years. My second guide, Cricket, worked for 7 years. And now Georgie just hit the 7-year mark. And she seems to be still going strong.
Okay, so you're on your 3rd guide dog. I've always wondered this because I have a dog, and I'm big dog guy. I love dogs and animals in general. So what happens when you retire a guide dog? Are you a dog owner? Are they your pet? Do you still have those dogs, or
Yeah. So
how do you transition?
Right. And so it is a transition process. They retire, and boy, they've been with you so long. So I think there's emotionally a transition process, and you can keep your guide dog, like Pantera stayed and was a pet for a year and a half, part of our family, and then she passed away. Mm-hmm. So that's certainly an option, is to just, keep them in your family, a part of that. If you're in a situation where it's like, I'm retiring this dog and I don't have space, I want to get a new guide dog, but I don't have space, then I know guide dogs for the blind, and they have, others that are willing to adopt your dog too, if you're in that situation where you can't keep the dog, and then they make sure they have a good home, whether it's with the puppy raiser or somewhere else. So thankfully each time I felt like it's been a real process to have a retirement party for them and thank them for their good work, and then honor them in their last years of life for the service they gave.
Yeah, I think that's just amazing, and I think that's something I'm definitely interested in down the road. I think just because I grew up with dogs, I have a dog now. It's just
sounds like it's your natural lifestyle.
Yeah, I don't see there ever being a time where I just don't have a dog. So I'm definitely interested in that. And I know that those dogs are very well trained, and they have very specific training, and it happens from, when they're puppies, and there's certain criteria they have to meet. What's the process like of getting a guide dog?
As you were describing, I thought the series Pick of the Litter is such a great one. It's on Netflix. I believe, Disney Plus, and it goes through this litter and the whole process. It's a really neat.
Oh, wow.
Really neat, just a neat documentary to see the whole process. You will, I know each time I've watched it, I cry and I feel like I'm just back in that place. But you make application to the school, and there's a lot of incredible schools. I've gone to Guide Dogs for the Blind each time, and they're remarkable because they're supportive from when you start the process to you come home with your new guide. And that's a little bit of an adjustment. And there's a support on the other end. So the whole process is remarkable, but you just, you start by contacting the school and making the application. You have to be trained first in O&M because you're directing the dog. It's kind of an interesting process because you're telling them where to go, knowing the direction of where you need to go, but then they're going to kind of pick up the slack if it's a little further or a little shorter when you need to turn left and those type of things. And they're also going to what they call intelligently disobey. So if I'm standing at the street and it sounds good, sounds like I'm good to go forward and cross the street, and my guide dog sees that nope, there's a car, that's turning that I'm not aware of, she's going to stop. She's going to pull me back or not be willing to go if it's not safe. So
that's amazing.
That still amazes me when it happens, and just the whole the whole thought process that a dog can have, that they can listen to you and respect you, but also know that there's sometimes you might tell them to do something that's not okay to do, and they're going to stand firm with that and not do it if it's not safe.
That is, the only word for it is amazing. Like how smart they are. And I'm sure, you probably have long list of experiences of where they surprised you.
Right. Yeah. And it's still, all these years, when that happens, there's this moment of just such gratitude, of realizing, wow, I'm sitting here kind of thinking about other things, or, navigating life, and reminder that this dog down here is watching out for me, watching for, is there cars that are backing up, and just so many things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that special you call it was called the Pick of the Litter.
Right. Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. While we're on the topic, on getting around, we talked about the cane, we talked about guide dogs, and I know that guide dog talk could have probably been a 3-hour discussion if we wanted it to be, but I don't want to leave out certain things. Another way you get around, which I find very interesting, is the tandem bike. And that's more of a hobby and like a fitness kind of thing versus a getting from point A to point B. Or do you ever use that, the tandem bike you ride with your husband? Do you ever use that to complete like daily tasks?
Not so much. Kind of just a fun, quick story. We actually got our first tandem after I had quit driving. So our kids were young. So we referred to it one summer as Mom's car. And I was on the front and the kids were on the back, and they were small enough, young enough that like a ride to swimming or different things was a little bit of a stretch. So they'd take turns on the back, and the other one would ride on their bike. So for one summer, it was Mom's car to get places. And then my ophthalmologist said, Becky, it's probably best if you're on the back of that tandem. And so it has become, just like a fun recreational activity. We love to do it. We go on trips and rent them. We we, kind of joke that it's our date night. We have loops around our house that we do. It's such a sense of freedom, because I'm just focused on, like, probably like if you were on a, stationary bike or whatever, like I'm not worried about anything about the steering. I just get to focus on, pedaling and going. And my husband, he's the captain. So he's pedaling, but he's also focused on all the steering, keep that type of thing. And
yeah, I was going to ask you, like a tandem bike, maybe if people who don't know what that is, it's a bike with 2 seats on it.
Right.
Both people pedal, right?
Right. We both pedal.
But one person steers.
Right. Yeah. Right. He steers. He's got control of the gears. And so the trick is, like, you have to stay balanced. There's still communication because, if he's turning right and I'm leaning the other way, I mean, we've had some falls over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're in sync. You're together. And so it's a lot of fun. Like, we're close enough that we can talk while we're riding. And I don't, it's another thing. I don't know if I would have tried tandem biking if we could have been on single bikes.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Yeah. We have a couple that we travel quite a bit with, and they have a tandem, and he's the one with RP. So his wife's on the front, so their tandem fits, their needs and
cool
everything. So
that's something I'll have to look into, for sure. And do you ever have, this is a joke, but do you ever go off any ramps?
No. We, in fact,
tandem BMX biking.
Yes, we've talked about getting a mountain tandem, and I think we're a little leery. Like, that's a lot of bike to navigate. So we're pretty much road and paved trails.
Okay, yeah. I do like the idea. I do like the picture of you and your husband going off ramps and doing backflips and spinning the handlebars around and things. I like that picture.
It's a good visual, huh?
Yeah. But yeah, thanks for sharing all those ways, I think. And it just sounds like great ways to stay active and busy. And it's also just like, sounds like a good way to connect with a friend or your husband. Like in your case, it's your husband,
Yeah.
One thing I don't want to miss, you got so many things I need to cover. So I wanted to bring up the fact that you wrote a book called Look Up, Move Forward. Can you tell everyone about that book? Because I think, if you're listening and you like kind of what Becky's saying, maybe you want to hear more straight from her, without me interjecting, you want to just hear Becky, which probably is preferred. Check out her book, Look Up, Move Forward. Can you tell everyone about that?
Sure. Yeah. I think, we all have a story. And I just felt like I wanted to put my story down, that I had learned a lot and grown a lot through the process. And so after I ran the Boston Marathon, the first time, I've had the opportunity to run that 2 times, but after I ran it the first time, I just kind of had this sense like, wow, what a journey to go from feeling like, what can I do, to being able to complete this dream. So it's just my memoir from diagnosis of retinitis pigmentosa to that journey of, giving up driving and starting to use the cane and starting to, getting a guide dog and creating my business, it's just having a family, just kind of my journey of trying to show up and live life in a brave and meaningful way.
Let's say I wanted to check this book out. Where can I find it?
Let's see. It's on Kindle, Audible. It's on our website, Resilient Solutions Inc., in large print, regular print. It's on Bookshare, Library for the Blind. So I tried to make sure it was accessible in all the different ways.
Yeah. And you have a website, right?
Yeah, let's see. Our work website. So my business, ResilienceSolutionsInc.com. Like we mentioned, I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor and just loved, named our business Resilient Solutions because I love the word resilient and all it represents, and feel privileged that I get to kind of navigate that journey with clients each day. And then we have a nonprofit, Oasis Center for Hope, that is for individuals, families, communities experiencing loss.
Yeah. And you cover that in your book, The Process of Starting Both of These Businesses.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, for those listening and you want to check out those organizations that Becky owns and operates out of, just click the show description. I'll have links there if you want to check out the websites. I also will have a link to Becky's website where you can find links to buy her book or find a way to listen to it. What's your social media handle? Because I know you're on Instagram.
Let's see. It's just my name, Becky_Andrews.
Awesome.
Facebook, Becky Andrews, Resilient Vision.
Awesome. And I like to close out each episode where I let my guests give a shout out to an organization that they want to promote. We didn't really get to go deep into your personal organizations, but yeah, do you have a specific nonprofit or organization you want to bring up?
Yeah, boy. And first of all, I am so grateful. I'm grateful for the mentors, the organizations that I feel like have helped get me to this point. And I think that's part of what I want to do is give back. And our nonprofit, so my for-profit, what I do each day is Resilient Solutions, where I'm a individual marriage and family therapist, but our nonprofit is Oasis Center for Hope, where we offer retreats. And this year they've been virtual retreats for women. And we're looking forward to expanding that to couples, men who are experiencing blindness, low vision. And we go through this process of owning our story. It's pretty remarkable that, the connection that forms, the sharing. And so we use a lot of Brene Brown's work and call them Daring to Own Your Story. So that's my passion, and just being able to give back and help others know they're not alone, and that there's resources available to them. There's people that care and have experienced what they're going through. So Oasis Center for Hope is our nonprofit, but we're, just starting to grow and build and expand further.
Awesome. That's amazing. And I love what you're doing there. And like I said earlier, if you're interested in learning more about Oasis Center for Hope or Resilient Solutions, just click on the show description. There you will find URLs to check those out.
Thank you.
But yeah, Becky, I think we covered quite a bit, and I think it was a really fun time for me to get to talk to you and hear your perspective. I always say this isn't the last time. I like to keep in touch with all my guests. I plan to bring all of them back, eventually, because it's hard to cover everything in one go.
Right. I would love that. What a pleasure to get to meet you and talk to you as well.
Yeah. I don't want to take up your whole day, Becky. I know you're a professional and you got things to do. So thanks again for your time, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on episode 25 of the podcast. And as always, if you want to dig deeper into the organizations Becky mentioned, or you want to check out her book, just click the show description and you'll find some helpful links there that will direct you to where you need to go. And again, if you haven't, please give the podcast a follow on social media. The handle is at SeeThroughPod. And make sure to subscribe or follow the podcast on whatever streaming platform you listen on. And if you have any suggestions or comments about the podcast that you want me to know, feel free to DM me on social media, or you can reach me by email. The email address is theseethroughpodcast@gmail.com. Believe it or not, several guests from this podcast reached out to me first, and that's how they got on the podcast. So don't be afraid to ask. But that's it for episode 25. Stay tuned for more episodes. Another one's coming next week. And until then, stay transparent, everyone.